The letter wasn't supposed to exist. A classified file sealed for over a decade, locked inside a forgotten storage vault in Quantico. No title, no rank, no ceremony, just a single call sign stamped in faded black across its cover, Iron Wolf. For years, no one knew whose name it belonged to until someone finally opened it. And when they did, everything changed. Before we begin, if you believe respect should be earned, not mocked, hit like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Because when the name Iron Wolf is spoken in this story, the air goes still, the room freezes, and nothing will ever be the same again. The morning air at Fort Lejeune was sharp and cold, carrying the quiet weight of expectation. This was where the future leaders of the Marine Corps were forged, a place where discipline wasn't requested, it was demanded. And yet Ava Mercer, standing at the far edge of the courtyard, felt the kind of silence that wasn't respect, but judgment. Late 20s, quiet, composed, a recent transfer from the medical division. Her uniform was spotless, her boots polished to mirror perfection, her stance precise. But no amount of discipline could hide the whispers around her. Some cadets smirked as they passed. Others didn't bother to lower their voices. Why is she even here? Probably begged her way in. Medics don't belong in leadership training. She stood motionless, hands clasped behind her back, eyes forward. But every laugh, every side glance, every cutting word, she heard them all. Then came Lieutenant Chase Harlan. 26, confident, brimming with arrogance polished into him from day one. He walked like someone who thought leadership was owed to him, not earned. He stopped just short of her, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Transfer, huh?" he said, voice loud enough to draw a few extra listeners. "Sergeant Mercer," she corrected evenly, not turning her head. "Not here, you're not," Harlan replied. "Here, you're just another cadet trying to keep up." The cadets behind him chuckled. One muttered under his breath about medics pretending to play soldier. Another added, "She probably got in on sympathy points." Ava didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give them what they wanted. But her silence wasn't weakness. Because Ava Mercer had learned long ago that the loudest person in the room usually had the least to say. By evening, the whispers had grown into casual mockery. In the locker room, Harlan leaned against a bench, replaying the morning's exchange to a crowd of eager listeners. "She corrected me," he said, mimicking her voice in a high-pitched tone. "Sergeant Mercer." He barked a laugh, drawing more from the group. "Bet she can't even field strip a rifle without Googling it." "I give her a week before she taps out," one cadet said. "I give her 3 days," another added. Sitting quietly at the far end, Ava unlaced her boots, shoulders relaxed, movements deliberate. She didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. But one cadet noticed something the others didn't. Corporal Leia Reyes, sharp-eyed and observant, caught the way Ava carefully folded her uniform into her locker. As she did, a small faded patch slipped free and landed on the floor. Leia picked it up before anyone else could see it, her gaze locking on the stitching. 3 words. Black thread on worn gray fabric. Iron Wolf Unit. Her breath caught for just a moment. The name sounded familiar, whispered somewhere before, deep in a late-night briefing or buried in an overheard story she was never meant to hear. She handed it back quietly. Ava accepted it without a word, tucked it back inside her jacket, locked her locker, and walked away without looking back. 2 weeks passed, and the joke sharpened. Harlan made sure of it. During a morning combat exercise, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Careful out there, Mercer. Wouldn't want you bruising those medic hands." Laughter erupted across the field. Ava ignored it as she always did. But Leia, watching from a distance, noticed something odd. Ava wasn't focused on Harlan or the jokes. She was scanning the ridge line behind the obstacle course, eyes narrowing slightly. Later that evening, long after drills had ended, Ava walked the perimeter alone. Her boots crunched softly against the gravel path as she traced her fingers along the cold steel fencing. She paused briefly where the woods pressed close, gaze locked on a corner camera mounted high on a post. It had flickered earlier that day, just for 1.7 seconds. Almost no one would have noticed, but Ava did. She took out a small, battered notebook from her pocket and wrote something down before walking on. That night, while most cadets crowded into the mess hall, the strategy hall was set up for a briefing. Rows of recruits filled the room, chatter low and restless. Lieutenant Harlan sat near the front, legs crossed, a grin already playing on his lips. Then, just as the lights dimmed, the overhead projector froze. A low chime echoed through the hall. A new notification flashed across the instructor's console. Restricted access login. Authorization code, Wolf 01. A hush rippled through the room. The instructor frowned, confused, tapping a few keys to override, but the system wouldn't respond. Then Ava's tablet, resting on the desk in front of her, vibrated once. She glanced down. One message, no subject, no sender, just 4 words on the glowing screen. Iron Wolf, stand by. Her fingers froze above the display. Her heartbeat surged. Across the aisle, Leia caught the brief flash of text. Her eyes widened, lips parting slightly as realization crawled over her expression. Iron Wolf. She didn't know what it meant. Not exactly. But she knew one thing. Whatever this was, Ava Mercer wasn't just another cadet. And someone somewhere had just called her back. Hours later, long after lights out, Ava sat cross-legged on her bunk in silence. Her notebook lay open across her knees, pages filled with handwritten coordinates, timestamps, and patterns, the kind of details no one else seemed to notice. She flipped to the newest entry, her pen hovering above the paper, tracing the words she'd just written. Wolf 01 authorization active. She closed the notebook softly, slid it beneath her pillow, and leaned back against the wall. Outside, a cold wind pressed against the windows, rattling the blinds softly against the glass. Somewhere deep inside the facility, encrypted servers processed the override request, sending automated alerts to systems far above Fort Lejeune's clearance level. And miles away, in a classified operations center, a man in a sharply pressed uniform leaned over a glowing console as the alert lit his screen. Colonel Marcus Hale. He froze, jaw tightening, fingers curling slowly into a fist. The words on his monitor pulsed once before fading into secure encryption. Iron Wolf protocol reactivated. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, almost to himself, he spoke the name like an oath carried on old memories. Iron Wolf activated. And with that, he stood, grabbed his cap, and walked out of the room without hesitation. Because when that call sign resurfaced, it meant only one thing. Someone at Fort Lejeune had no idea who they were mocking, but they were about to find out. The message had been sent. The protocols had been triggered. And somewhere deep in the silence of night, wheels began turning that no one at Fort Lejeune even knew existed. By morning, the base felt different. The air hung heavier. Conversations that once carried laughter now carried unease. Inside the training hall, cadets filed into their rows, their chatter low but restless. The previous night's incident, the strange system override, the mysterious notification, was all anyone whispered about. Lieutenant Chase Harlan, however, seemed unaffected. He leaned casually against the podium, flipping through his notes with the relaxed arrogance of someone who believed the world revolved around him. "Guess the medic's secret is out," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear, smirking. "Probably hacked the system herself." Desperate move for attention. A few cadets chuckled nervously, but no one laughed as easily as before. Something in the air felt unsettled, like they were standing on thin ice they couldn't yet see cracking. Ava Mercer sat quietly near the back of the room, her tablet closed, her posture steady. Her expression gave nothing away, but her chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. Leia Reyes, sitting 2 rows ahead, glanced back at her and lowered her voice just enough to be heard. "Ava, what's going on?" "Last night, that message." Ava didn't answer. Her gaze stayed forward, unblinking. But Leia saw her hand, steady, but clenched tight against her knee. Before another word could pass between them, the lights in the hall flickered once, then again. Then they died completely. A low ripple of voices broke the silence. The power cut lasted only 7 seconds, but when the lights came back on, something was different. The central display monitors lit up with a new override notification. This one carried no code, no clearance request, just a single name flashing in bright white text. Colonel Marcus Hale inbound. It started faintly at first, the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor, then boots striking marble. Steady, deliberate, precise. The double doors at the end of the hall swung open, and in walked a figure whose presence silenced the entire room without a single word. Colonel Marcus Hale. Late 40s, broad-shouldered, decorated. His chest bore rows of ribbons, his rank insignia gleaming beneath the harsh lights. But it wasn't the uniform that froze everyone in place. It was the weight he carried, the kind of weight only earned when you've led men into places they weren't meant to come back from and brought them home anyway. Hale didn't speak at first. He let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping slowly across the room until it locked on Ava Mercer. For the first time since arriving at Fort Lejeune, Ava shifted in her seat. Not out of fear, not out of surprise, but recognition. Hale stepped forward, his boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, calm, but it carried like thunder. "Iron Wolf, stand by." The entire room froze. Harlan, sitting at the front, blinked once, confused. "Wait, what?" Hale turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. Sergeant Ava Mercer, front and center. Ava stood, not hurriedly, not nervously, but with the quiet precision of someone who had spent her life under orders far more dangerous than this. She walked down the aisle, boots striking rhythmically against the floor, until she stood directly before him. The colonel's posture remained sharp, but his voice softened ever so slightly when he spoke again. "Good to see you again, Iron Wolf." Gasps rippled through the room. Cadets exchanged bewildered glances, whispers breaking into a soft roar before dying again under Hale's stare. Harlan, still seated, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms with a smirk. "Is this some kind of show? She's just a transfer, a medic." Hale turned sharply, his eyes locking on him. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice like steel. "At ease. You've said enough." Something in Hale's tone made Harlan's jaw clench. His arrogance faltered for the first time since Ava arrived at Fort Lejeune. The colonel let the silence breathe before continuing. "You think you know who you're training with?" he said, his gaze sweeping the rows of cadets. "You think you understand the value of rank and medals?" He shook his head slightly, his voice steady but edged with something unspoken. "Pride, maybe. Or memory. You don't have a clue who she is." No one moved. No one breathed. 7 years ago, Hale continued, a covert unit executed an unauthorized extraction during the Kandahar Ridge incident. 12 Marines were trapped. 3 extraction teams failed. The mission was declared a loss. He paused, letting the words settle, his eyes never leaving Ava. Then one operator, under the call sign Iron Wolf, led a 4-person unit into enemy territory. No air support, no backup, no chance of survival. 47 minutes later, every one of those Marines was walking again. He drew a breath. She commanded that team. A stunned silence fell across the hall like a curtain. Chairs creaked as cadets unconsciously straightened in their seats, trying to process the weight of what they'd just heard. "She didn't just earn that call sign," Hale said. "She built it." He stepped closer to Ava, lowering his voice, not for secrecy but reverence. "And she saved my life." Gasps broke out across the room. Leia Reyes stared wide-eyed, her chest rising and falling in disbelief. Even Harlan, his mouth half open as if searching for words, sank back into his seat, color draining from his face. Hale turned toward him fully now, his tone sharpening. "You mocked her," he said quietly, but the quiet carried more power than any shout. "You called her weak. Unworthy." Harlan tried to find his footing, straightening slightly. I didn't know who she was," he stammered. "That's the point, Lieutenant," Hale said. "You didn't ask." Hale faced the room again, his voice steady, commanding, final. "From this moment forward, you will address her by her proper designation, Sergeant Ava Mercer, Iron Wolf Unit. And if any of you think this is about rank—" He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room one last time. "You're not ready to lead Marines." Then something unexpected happened. A single cadet seated near the back slowly stood and came to attention. He raised his hand in a perfect salute. Then another, and another. Within seconds, every cadet in the room was on their feet, boots aligned, backs straight, arms raised. Hundreds of salutes snapping into perfect unison. For the first time since arriving at Fort Lejeune, Ava Mercer stood before them, silent, her expression unreadable, but her presence unshakable. And in that silence, something shifted. She wasn't just a transfer anymore. She wasn't the medic they mocked, the outsider they whispered about. She was Iron Wolf. And every single person in that room knew it. But Colonel Hale wasn't finished. He stepped closer to Ava, speaking low enough for her ears only. "They know now," he said softly. "But this isn't about them." Ava's jaw tightened slightly. "Then who is it about?" Hale's gaze hardened. "Someone's watching this base. Someone who shouldn't be." Ava's eyes narrowed. Her fingers curled slightly at her side. "Then it starts again," she whispered. Hale nodded once. "Welcome back, Iron Wolf." The salutes had fallen, but the silence lingered. Ava Mercer, the medic they mocked, the transfer they dismissed, was Iron Wolf. And while the cadets processed the weight of that revelation, Colonel Marcus Hale's warning still echoed in her mind. Someone's watching this base. That night, heavy rain battered Fort Lejeune. Ava sat on the edge of her bunk, her encrypted tablet pulsing softly with the same 4 words as before. "Iron Wolf, stand by." Before she could process it further, alarms ripped through the facility. "Breach detected." West Perimeter. Cadets scrambled from their bunks. Orders were shouted. Sirens screamed across the compound. Within minutes, the strategy hall was alive with chaos. Hale stood at the center, issuing commands like rapid fire. Lock down Alpha Section. Seal the gates. Secure the armory. But a junior officer's voice cut through the noise, shaky and pale. Sir, they're not breaching from outside. Hale turned sharply. What? Internal motion sensors triggered. Whoever's inside was already here. The room went cold. Hale's eyes found Ava immediately. South wing. Take Reyes. Move. Ava grabbed her sidearm, and within seconds she and Leia Reyes were gone, boots pounding against polished floors as they descended into the shadowed hallways. The corridors were silent except for the low hum of flickering emergency lights. Then Ava spotted it, a vent panel near the security feed, freshly disturbed. They've been here, she whispered. And then a sound, soft, subtle. A scuff of a boot behind them. Ava raised her weapon. Step out! From the shadows, a masked figure emerged, dressed in black fatigues, carrying suppressed gear not issued to any Marine unit. He hesitated only for a moment before lunging. Leia fired. The intruder dodged, bolting down the corridor. Ava didn't hesitate. She gave chase. The pursuit tore through twisting hallways until the figure disappeared into the lower maintenance wing. Ava followed, sliding to a halt at the end of the corridor. That's when she saw it. A small device planted against the main security panel, blinking silently. She yanked it free and turned it over in her hand. Not foreign tech. Not random sabotage. U.S. military issue. Someone inside their own system had authorized this breach. By dawn, the alarms fell silent. The intruders had vanished, leaving behind no casualties, no stolen equipment, just planted devices and unanswered questions. This wasn't an attack, Ava said, placing the device on the operations table with a sharp clink. They weren't here to destroy anything. Hale's expression darkened. No, he said quietly. They were testing us. Across the room, Lieutenant Harlan, the same man who mocked her from day one, stepped forward hesitantly. His arrogance was gone, replaced with something else entirely. I didn't know, he said softly. Ava studied him for a moment, her face unreadable. Finally she spoke. Now you do. As dawn broke over Fort Lejeune, Ava stood beneath the rain-soaked awning, staring into the misty horizon. The call sign they buried years ago was alive again. Iron Wolf. And someone out there wanted to see if she'd forgotten who she was. They were wrong. Because Ava Mercer wasn't here to fit in. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to lead. And this time, the whole base knew exactly who she was.